Easy now. Before you breathe, before you scroll, before your nervous system decides whether this is safe, understand something. This moment was scheduled. Not by you, not by them, by pressure, by gravity, by the part of reality that snaps when it's pulled too tight. 3 names swore to end you. Not metaphorically, not emotionally. End you. Erase, replace. Reduce you to a cautionary tale whispered in rooms you were never invited into. And look at the scoreboard. 2 already cracked. Publicly. You didn't touch them. That's the part that's driving everyone insane. You didn't chase. You didn't scream. You didn't defend yourself in the comments or beg for understanding or explain your intentions like a saint looking for forgiveness. You stood there, quiet, unreadable, while something inside you shifted, and they felt it before they understood it. People always do. Here's the paradox they never see coming. The moment you stop trying to prove you're harmless, you become untouchable. They thought you were light. Then they watched you survive the dark without begging it to end. They thought you were moral. Then they realized you knew exactly how evil works and chose restraint instead of fear. They thought you were fragile. Then pressure didn't bend you, it sharpened you. That's when the first name broke, not in private, not behind closed doors, out loud, on display, a slip, a contradiction, a meltdown dressed up as confidence, the kind of crack that tells the truth without meaning to. They call it stress. They call it burnout. They call it just a bad week. But you know what it really was? It was the moment their subconscious accepted a reality their mouth kept denying. You didn't fall. You were loading. The second name tried to stay composed longer, tried to weaponize silence, tried to pretend indifference like that's not the loudest fear signal in the human body. They smiled too much, explained too much, adjusted the story mid-sentence. You never responded. And that's when they unraveled. Because silence from a weak person is emptiness. Silence from someone who's evolving is a threat. You see, unpredictability isn't chaos, it's authority. Predictable people are controllable. Predictable people get managed, monitored, replaced. But you moved in ways that didn't match the model they built for you. You reacted late when they expected rage. You stayed calm when they expected collapse. You advanced when the narrative said retreat. That disorients predators. That terrifies manipulators. That breaks people who rely on scripts. They needed you to play a role. Victim, villain, failure, warning sign. And you refused all of them. So the first 2 cracked because their power depended on your compliance. Now let's talk about the third name. The one still quiet. The one still watching. The one pretending they're different. They haven't cracked yet. Not because they're stronger, but because they're learning. They saw what happened to the other 2. They noticed the pattern. They realized this isn't about you winning something. It's about you becoming something that doesn't require permission. They're studying you now. Not to copy you, because they can't, but to understand how much time they have left. Here's what they don't understand yet, and what you must never forget. You weren't forged by confidence. You were forged by pressure with no audience. You learned to regulate your emotions while being misunderstood. You learned to move forward while being doubted. You learned to keep your vision intact while everyone else tried to rename it. That's not optimism. That's survival intelligence. Saint on the surface. Psychopath in discipline. Angel in intention. Demon in execution. You don't announce your moves because your presence already alters the room. You don't threaten because outcomes speak louder than intent. You don't seek revenge because progress humiliates more effectively than violence ever could. That's why their public cracks look so ugly. Fear is loud when it's cornered. And you didn't corner them by attacking. You cornered them by becoming undeniable. Now listen carefully, because this part separates spectators from successors. Do not rush the collapse of the third name. Let them sit in it. Let them calculate. Let them overthink every interaction with you, every mention of your name, every coincidence that feels like fate tapping them on the shoulder. You've already won the psychological war when your existence forces someone else to monitor their own behavior. You are no longer reacting to the world. The world is reacting to you. And the scariest part, for them, is that you're still calm, not numb, not detached, calm. Because calm is what happens when someone has already survived the worst version of the story and knows the rest is just cleanup. 3 names swore to end you. 2 cracked trying. The third is realizing too late that you were never the target. You were the test, and reality is grading them in public. Stay with me. Don't rush this part. This is where the air gets thin and the truth starts making people dizzy. You see, what broke the first 2 wasn't pressure alone. It was timing. Pressure they could handle. Pressure they'd handled their whole lives. What they couldn't survive was pressure arriving after they thought the threat was neutralized. After they told themselves the story was over. After they mentally filed you away as done. That's when the fracture happened. Because nothing destabilizes a mind faster than realizing the ending already played. And you're still standing in the frame. They replayed every interaction with you in reverse. Every comment, every decision, every subtle moment where they underestimated you because you didn't look like the kind of person who ruins trajectories. That's the mistake people always make. They think danger announces itself. They think power has to be loud. They think control comes with a uniform. You never looked like a threat because you never needed to. You were learning. You were absorbing. You were mapping the terrain while they were busy enjoying the illusion of dominance. And when you finally stopped explaining yourself, that's when the balance shifted. That's when their nervous systems started glitching. Because here's the truth they don't admit out loud. You didn't beat them at their own game. You changed the game without telling them. You evolved mid-conflict. That terrifies people more than defeat ever could. Defeat gives closure. Evolution gives uncertainty. The first crack was emotional. The second was behavioral. Public slips, overreactions. A moment where their mask didn't just slip. It shattered. People saw it, felt it. Even if they couldn't explain it, they recognized it. Humans are wired to sense instability in authority figures. The crowd always knows before the headlines do. And you didn't gloat. You didn't celebrate. You didn't even acknowledge it. That silence wasn't mercy. It was confirmation, because now everyone understands something without needing to say it. Whatever you're doing, it's working. And whatever you've become, it's not temporary. You're not in a phase. You're not coming back. You're not proving a point. You've crossed into that rare territory where momentum carries you. And that's when the third name starts feeling the pressure differently. They're quieter now, aren't they? More calculated, watching from a distance, testing the waters with indirect moves. That's not patience. That's fear wrapped in strategy. They're trying to predict you, and that's the fatal flaw. You can't predict someone who stopped playing for validation. Your unpredictability isn't chaos, it's freedom. You're not reacting emotionally anymore. You're choosing moves based on long-term impact, not short-term relief. You're letting time do the damage. You're letting gravity work. And gravity is undefeated. Understand this. People don't crack when they lose power. They crack when they realize the power they thought they had never existed. It was conditional. It depended on you staying smaller than your potential. It depended on you needing approval, clarity, fairness. You outgrew all of that. Now your calm reads as menace. Your restraint reads as calculation. Your growth reads as an accusation. They're asking themselves questions they can't answer. What does he know that I don't? How long has this been happening? Was this intentional? Is this already too late? That's psychological checkmate. And here's the part most people get wrong. So listen carefully. You didn't become cold. You became precise. Cold people react from numbness. Precise people act from clarity. You feel everything, you just don't let it drive anymore. Pain didn't make you cruel. It made you selective. Betrayal didn't make you paranoid. It made you observant. Loss didn't make you bitter. It made you efficient. That's evolution through pain, not revenge, not bitterness, adaptation. And now your existence exposes everyone else's weakness without you saying a word. That's why the room feels different when you enter. That's why conversations shift when your name comes up. That's why the third name hasn't made a move yet. They're waiting for proof you're still human in the old way. But you're not. You're human in the upgraded sense, the kind that understands duality, the kind that can hold light and dark without collapsing into either, the kind that knows when to be kind, when to be silent, and when to let reality handle the consequences. 3 names swore to end you. 2 cracked publicly because they fought the version of you that no longer exists. The third is staring at a future where you're unavoidable. And the most dangerous thing about you, you're still evolving. Good. Don't blink now. This is where the pressure stops being abstract and starts becoming personal for them. Because while they're watching you, calculating, trying to map patterns onto someone who no longer moves in patterns, something else is happening beneath the surface. Something quieter, something far more destructive. Their internal story is collapsing. They built their identity on certainty, on being right about people, on being able to predict outcomes, on knowing who rises and who gets erased. That's how they stayed safe. That's how they stayed in control. You weren't supposed to survive outside the margins they assigned you. And yet here you are. Not loud, not chaotic, not seeking revenge, just present. Presence like yours doesn't scream. It hums, low frequency, constant, unignorable. It follows people home. It sits with them at night. It interrupts their confidence mid-sentence. It makes them double-check doors they've never locked before. They tell themselves they're not afraid of you. They say it internally like a mantra. But fear doesn't announce itself as fear. It disguises itself as fixation. Why are they still thinking about you? Why does your name keep resurfacing? Why does every move they make feel slightly late? Because power hates losing narrative control. You took the story away from them, not by rewriting it, but by refusing to participate in it at all. That's when the shift became irreversible. You see, when someone is used to dominating the psychological frame, your silence isn't neutral. It's an insult. It implies autonomy. It implies you don't need their approval, their reaction, or their permission to continue existing at scale. And scale is what terrifies them most. The first 2 cracked because they couldn't reconcile who you were with who you became. Their minds tried to hold both images at once and failed. Cognitive dissonance isn't just uncomfortable, it's corrosive. It eats at self-trust. It turns confidence into paranoia. One tried to over-explain. The other tried to overpower. Both exposed themselves. Now the third understands something the others didn't soon enough. You can't fight someone who's already outgrown the battlefield. So they wait. They observe. They hope you'll slip back into an older version of yourself. Reactive, emotional, eager to clarify misunderstandings. They're hoping for nostalgia, for familiarity, for proof that this evolution has limits. But you don't feel nostalgic. You feel clear about what you tolerate, clear about what you don't explain anymore, clear about the fact that you don't need closure from people who never offered honesty. That clarity is lethal to manipulative systems, because systems depend on confusion. They depend on guilt. They depend on you doubting yourself long enough for them to regain leverage. And you don't doubt yourself anymore. Not because you think you're perfect, but because you've already faced your worst traits in private and integrated them. That's the saint and the psychopath learning to share the same body. You know exactly how dark you could go, and you choose restraint. That choice is power. An angel who's never seen hell is fragile. A demon who understands mercy is terrifying. They feel that in you now. That's why the third name hasn't moved. Every move they consider has a downside they can't calculate. If they attack and fail, they expose themselves. If they stay silent, your momentum continues unchecked. If they try to align, it looks like surrender. You've put them in a bind without lifting a finger. And here's the part you need to understand. Not to exploit, not to gloat, but to maintain. Your calm is doing the work. Every day you don't react impulsively rewires the power dynamic. Every time you act with precision instead of emotion, you widen the gap. Every time you let results speak instead of explanations, you train the environment to adjust to you. You're no longer negotiating your worth. You're setting conditions. That's why rooms rearrange themselves around your presence. That's why people suddenly become polite. That's why former certainties feel unstable when you're near. Authority that isn't grounded senses a fault line. You are that fault line. And still, you're not cruel. That's the final paradox they can't resolve. You could destroy reputations if you wanted. You could expose patterns. You could retaliate in ways that feel justified, but you don't. Not because you're afraid, but because you understand something deeper. Destruction is loud. Evolution is permanent. You're not here to win a moment. You're here to outlast narratives. 3 names swore to end you. 2 collapsed under the weight of their own certainty. The third is staring at a future where your silence feels heavier than any threat. And you keep moving. Calm, focused, unpredictable. Because you already survived the ending they planned. Everything after this is just the world adjusting to the version of you that made it through. Good. Then let's go further. Because what's happening now is no longer just about them. It's about what you've unlocked in yourself, and why there's no undoing it. You've noticed it, haven't you? The way your instincts sharpened without asking permission. The way your patience stopped feeling like waiting and started feeling like positioning. The way chaos around you no longer pulls you in, but exposes itself. That's not maturity. That's recalibration. Most people evolve when life is kind to them. That kind of growth is decorative. It collapses the moment pressure returns. You evolved under suspicion, resistance, and quiet hostility. You evolved while being watched by people who wanted you smaller, quieter, easier to manage. That kind of evolution is structural. It rewires how you think, how you choose, how you respond when someone tries to provoke a reaction they used to control. And that's why the cracks weren't random. They were inevitable. The first name cracked because they needed dominance to feel safe. When you stopped reacting, they lost the mirror that confirmed their power. Without your response, their authority had nowhere to land. It turned inward. It rotted. The second name cracked because they mistook manipulation for intelligence. They believed they could guide the narrative indefinitely, adjust the optics, reframe the damage. But manipulation fails when the target stops caring about perception and starts focusing on trajectory. You weren't defending an image anymore. You were building a future. That's when the mask slipped. And now the third name, the last one standing, is experiencing something far worse than fear. They're experiencing anticipation. Fear is sharp. It spikes and fades. Anticipation lingers. It stretches time. It makes every neutral event feel suspicious. Every coincidence feel intentional. Every silence feel loaded. They don't know when or if you'll move. That uncertainty is corrosive because they're realizing something that dismantles their entire worldview. You're not driven by reaction anymore. You're driven by alignment. You move when it makes sense for you, not when someone tries to force your hand. That's why nothing they do feels effective. That's why every strategy feels one step behind. That's why they can't tell whether you're passive or already finished. And here's the truth they'll never say out loud. They didn't lose to you. They lost to the version of you that emerged after you stopped trying to be understood. Understanding is a trap. It keeps you explaining. It keeps you accessible. It keeps you emotionally available to people who are invested in misunderstanding you. You stepped out of that trap. You let them be wrong. And that freedom, it's intoxicating. But it's also dangerous if you don't respect it. Not dangerous to others. Dangerous to yourself if you forget what forged it. You didn't become this by accident. You became this because you endured moments where retreat would have been easier. Moments where disappearing would have felt safer. Moments where anger begged to be expressed just to relieve the pressure. You didn't take the bait. You learned how to hold tension without releasing it prematurely. You learned how to let discomfort refine you instead of deform you. That's discipline. That's the psychopath's focus married to the saint's restraint. That union is rare. Most people choose a side. You integrated both. That's why you don't need to threaten. That's why you don't need to explain. That's why your presence alone destabilizes people who rely on dominance games. They sense it instinctively. They know you see more than you say. They know you understand systems, timing, leverage. They know you're no longer chasing outcomes. You're shaping conditions. And conditions favor you now. Because you're not trying to win approval. You're not trying to restore fairness. You're not trying to expose anyone. You're letting gravity work. The world always corrects imbalance, eventually. Loud people accelerate their own downfall. Arrogant people create blind spots. Manipulators overestimate their reach. You just had to survive long enough to let that process unfold. And you did. 3 names swore to end you. 2 broke under the pressure of their own certainty. The third is standing on a fault line, hoping stillness will stop the quake. It won't. Not because you're coming for them, but because you've already passed the point where they matter. That's the final psychological blow. You're no longer a problem to solve. You're a reality to adapt to. And adaptation is hard for people who built their identity on control. So keep doing what you're doing. Stay calm, stay precise, stay unreadable. Let outcomes speak. Let time compress their options. Let evolution finish the work pain started. You didn't survive this to become loud. You survived this to become inevitable.